On this week's show, the panel rates the Plekanec trade and how badly were Max Pacioretty's feelings hurt when fans booed him at the Bell Center. Welcome to this week's Hockey Inside Out. I'm Adam Susser, and joining me today is Stu Cowan, CBC Daybreak's Jessica Rusnak, and you may recognize her face from Sportsnet, CTV, and City TV, or perhaps her voice from Show'em, Virgin Radio, and CJAD. She's also a stand-up comedian. Did I get all of the credits?
That's pretty good. I think that's it for now. I'll let you know.
Okay, feel free to throw some
But
in
can
there.
you play center?
Maybe. You never know. Can't do any worse.
Chantal Desjardins is with us. Let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about on today's show. Number one, does Marc Bergevin not defending Max Pacioretty to the media mean the captain won't be back with the team next season? Number two, what do you think about Pacioretty's emotional comments following the NHL trade deadline? Number three, Marc Bergevin said he wants to build his team around youth, speed, and character. Does that make sense after 6 years on the job as GM? Number four, how do you rate the return on the Thomas Plekanec trade to the Maple Leafs? And number five, will any of the Canadiens' trade deadline acquisitions play meaningful roles for the team? Let's start the show. Remember that time in 2003 when some mischievous Canadiens fans booed Patrice Brisebois at the Bell Center, and then GM Bob Gainey turned to the media and called those fans a bunch of gutless bastards? Well, Marc Bergevin proved to be no Bob Gainey when addressing the media at the trade deadline news conference, as he made absolutely no reference to the fact that Habs fans booed Max Pacioretty last Saturday night. Understandably, Bergevin is in no position to call dissatisfied Canadian fans gutless or bastards, but I'm pretty sure Patches would have appreciated a pathetic babies reference or even a wimpy pukes mention, something just to show that he cares. Do you think the fact that Marc Bergevin did not defend Max Pacioretty means that he likely won't be around next season?
I wouldn't say it's a good sign. I didn't expect him to full-on say he's going to be our captain next season, but he could have done a little bit less by saying, we stand behind him, we're all taking the blame for this, or at the very least, don't boo the guy when he misses a breakaway. The fact that he didn't say any of that, I was like, and when he was asked if he'll re-sign him the first chance he'll get, and he was like, July 1st is a long time away, I was like, he's not coming back.
Well, you have to take everything Marc Bergevin says with a grain of salt. Remember, I'm not shopping PK Subban.
Right.
But I mean, Max Pacioretty, I think part of his emotional comments after the game had to do with the fact, I'm sure he listened to what Marc Bergevin was saying and heard what he said, and Max is a sensitive type of guy. That's one of the issues he has with being captain, is he lets stuff bother him too much. And if I was in Max's shoes, I would have been upset to hear that. Here's a guy who scored 30 goals 4 years in a row with his GM never getting him a number one center. He still scored 30 goals. He's having his first off season, and all of a sudden he's the guy that they're going to get rid of. And it's as I've said before, it's like with Andre Markov. It's one of those cases that you don't appreciate what you have till it's gone. Wherever Max Pacioretty goes, if he does go somewhere, he's going to score minimum 30 goals with the number one center, if not 40. So I can understand why Max would be upset. And the GM, to me, didn't show much leadership the way he handled it.
Well, especially Max all season long has said the situation we're in is avoidable. And that's definitely a message to the general manager that they never got anyone to replace Alex Radulov, still looking for that number one center. So it must be extremely frustrated for Max Pacioretty to constantly have to shoulder so much of the weight on him, not only them being the captain, having talked to the media, but also they look to him to be the goal scorer, and then his team doesn't necessarily have his back like he wanted. And especially this summer, going and buying a house in Westmount, spending the entire summer in Montreal. His third son was born here. He was really ready to embrace Montreal as like his second home. And then this season did not go at all the way he planned, and he's perhaps out the door already. So I think that whole situation is probably just a build-up on him.
And now that he didn't back him up and he's not gone, they still have 20 games. Like, how is their relationship going to be for the next 20 games? I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
And Pacioretty, I think, was upset, too, by some TV comments that he had asked and wanted out of Montreal. I mean, maybe he did say that to somebody else. I mean, Jess and I are in the room almost every day. I talk with Max Pacioretty almost every day, and I've asked him the question I don't know how many times, and he's always insisted how much he wants to stay in Montreal. He loves Montreal. His kids love Montreal. So where that came from, I think that upset him a bit, too.
Who do you think they would even get, though, that would make the team better if they would trade him? Because, I mean, he's the most consistent goal scorer by far.
Well, you got to get somebody who can score 30 goals. As I said, this is the one season, and those guys don't grow on trees. The thing with Max Pacioretty, a lot of people knock him because he's a big guy who doesn't play big. He is who he is.
Yeah.
He's never going to be. He's a guy who grew up in Connecticut, big kid. He's probably the best athlete all along. Probably never been in a fight or anything like that, but he can score, and not a lot of guys in the NHL can shoot the puck and score, and he can't. So if you get rid of him, there's not a lot of guys out there to replace him.
So during the media scrum after Monday night's loss to Philadelphia, Max Pacioretty got a little bit emotional when talking to the media. He emphasized how much he wanted to stay in Montreal, how he never asked to be traded, and he said that he didn't feel like he should shoulder the whole weight of the season and how it turned out. What do you think of some of the things that he said to the media?
I agree with him because, yes, Max Pacioretty has been the guy that everyone's been pointing the finger at and has been getting all of these questions over and over. Carey Price, he's another guy who was a disappointment this season, and he has not had the same type of scrutiny or having to answer questions because it's a little bit more easy for Carey Price with being in the goaltender position. He's not talking today. He's not available on game day. He's now injured, so he's not talking to the media. So I think in a way he kind of gets a little bit of favoritism when it comes to the media. They can keep his scrum short. A lot of times Carey Price's scrum is a minute and a half, and then they say it's done. Whereas Max Pacioretty doesn't necessarily have that luxury. If you want to look to Carl Alzner, he was supposed to be the big off-season signing that was going to help this blue line be an upgrade on Alexei Yemlin, but he's been underperforming, and no one's talking about Carl Alzner.
I liked Max's comments. A lot of people were on him at the fact that he didn't, shoulder all of the blame, but he's been taking the weight of the captaincy since he became captain on his shoulders, and he's just walking around like it's this heavy weight. Like he's been a bit of a downer, and it shows on the ice, it shows off the ice, and I think now for the first time, it's almost like a little bit of maturity that he's like, it's not just me. It's probably healthier, and then people are all over him. Like.
It's a good thing Marc Bergevin goes to the gym as much as he does because the weight of this whole season is on him. This is a team, he started the season $8 million below the salary cap. After asking season tickets, Jeff Molson asking season ticket holders to pay $150 per ticket if they want them printed out. They start the season $8 million below the salary cap. This is the Montreal Canadiens. That's one superstar player or two very good players that they've played the whole season without. Then Bergevin comes out and says, the answer's in the room. The answer's in the general manager's room. It's not in the locker room. And I think players are frustrated. They'll never say it, but I think players are really frustrated that this GM did not do enough to help them. I think Carey Price, when he signed that contract for 8 years, this isn't the team he thought he was going to be playing behind. So I think the weight of this is on the GM, and I agree, Max Pacioretty has been unfairly singled out for too much criticism on this team. After 4 years in a row scoring 30 goals with Philippe Danault, David Desharnais, and no knock on those players, but they're not number one centers in the NHL.
Right.
Well, it looks like Pacioretty maybe took a little page from Bergevin's book because Bergevin never seems that bothered with the state of the team. At the trade deadline press conference, Marc Bergevin said that he wanted to build his team around youth, speed, and character. Does that make sense after 6 years on the job?
Well, that's what he said 6 years ago, wasn't that, in 2012?
Is that what everybody
Let's
wants?
trade PK Subban for Shea Weber, youth and speed. Okay. He's grasping at straws now. I honestly don't know if he has a legitimate plan. Like 6 years into the job, you're going to build through the draft now?
But that's what he said when he came in, that the only way to make a Stanley Cup contending team is through the draft. He said, coming from Chicago, that's how they did that. But he hasn't been able to build through the draft. So why all of a sudden now can he make it? And that's what he said that Habs fans should look forward to are all the draft picks they have coming up in June.
I'm looking at it both sides. Like on one hand, yes, 6 years in, you should see some of the seeds that were planted 6 years ago. You should see some of them come to fruition. But to defend him a little bit, like, I don't know if his outlook has changed that much in terms of who he's drafted. Like, you look at drafting Galchenyuk, like his idea was young and speed and good character. I mean, it didn't work out on the top line center. Yeah, well, ideally, but it didn't work out. But like, the youth speed movement, like Sherback, he's maybe got a bit of an issue with like buying in or whatever. But like Juleson, like he's got some injuries. But I think this is the only time I'm going to defend him that I don't think his goal has changed that much. It just hasn't come to fruition yet. Like the idea stays the same.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously took this job wanting, he's a Montreal guy. He wanted to do a good job, but he hasn't done a good job. And I just think like now, 6 years in now we're going to go young and speed and through it's like, why didn't you do that 6 years ago? And if you're going to do that, youth and speed, you've got a 31-year-old goalie going into an 8-year contract, and you got a 32-year-old defenseman in Shea Weber who's got like 9,000 years left on his contract. So I don't get it.
I think he's developed a bit of a Napoleon complex without being such a small guy. I've been a Marc Bergevin fan for the most of the time, his tenure in Montreal, but I just feel like last summer he lost me. He got a lot more arrogant. The way he treated Radulov and Markov, and it shows. And now there's no coming back from that. I mean, what pieces does he even have to trade to offer other teams?
Well, that's the thing. The only piece he had was Sergachev, and he had to trade him to Tampa. So now you look around in Laval, there's no one that can entice other teams with to make a good trade.
And that Sergachev trade hasn't worked out
Yes.
that well. I mean, Jonathan Drouin, what a disappointment.
I mean,
this
but
is a
there's
kid.
only-
It's
you
not
can
just the
only go up,
numbers.
though.
It's not just the numbers.
Right? Like-
the lack of effort I've seen from Jonathan Drouin this season has been really shocking to me. For a
think-
Montreal kid to come here and not play like Brendan Gallagher every shift is really, I find, concerning moving forward.
But you touched on it. He's a Montreal kid. I feel like there's so much pressure on his shoulders to be the French superstar to come in here, and he's a young kid at 22 that I think he'll grow into it. I think give him another season. He didn't have the chemistry with Max. Like I think one more season and he can't do worse.
But sometimes points don't come. Arturi Lehkonen is an example.
Yeah.
He's not putting points, but he works his butt off every
Right.
single shift, and I'd like to see Jonathan Drouin do the same thing.
I mean, look at the team he's on. I think it's more that's the problem. So on Sunday, the Canadiens traded veteran Thomas Plekanec to Toronto for forward Kirby Reilly and defenseman Rinat Valiev, as well as a second-round draft pick in the 2018 NHL draft. How would you rate the return on that trade for the Habs?
It's hard to say because I haven't seen any of those two players play yet, but from what I've heard is that the Rinat Valiev, the defenseman, is the one that people are saying could really be an impact on this team. Kirby Reilly, he was a first-round pick. He hasn't yet cracked the NHL lineup, but that being said, sometimes you just need a new team, and that's really what can get you going. If you look at Nicolas Deslauriers, that was really what happened with him there. But overall, I think it was a pretty good return for Thomas Plekanec, and especially that second-round pick is going to come out huge.
Totally. I liked it. He's 35 years old. I mean, a lot of people thought he was only going to get like a third round for him. We got two players that may or may not play. They'll probably play this season since we're inviting the whole AHL team up. But I thought it was great. It was fine. And he might come back. I thought he was going to be more insulted about being traded than he was. Like, he seemed to take it really...
Because I think he knew, it was coming, and he could re-sign here in the
Right,
summer.
and that's the thing. Do you think was he supposed to let it slip that he and Bergevin had a chat about like...
No, he was asked about it, but I mean, I've been very critical of Bergevin, but in this situation, I praise him. I thought he handled the Plekanec situation perfectly because Plekanec made it very clear. I had a conversation with him a few weeks ago that he did not want to leave Montreal. He wanted to finish his career here. He didn't want to be traded at the deadline. But Bergevin handled it classy enough that I'm sure he talked with him about it. And Plekanec had nothing but good things to say about Bergevin when he left. I'm happy for Plekanec because he'd be a perfect fit in Toronto as a fourth-line center on a really good offensive team under Mike Babcock. Babcock will love him. He'll appreciate it. From the Canadiens' end, I think this was a trade that was made to boost the Laval rocket and has very little to do with the Canadiens because Reichel's a former first-round pick. He never made it, but Laval's been terrible too, and they got to make that team a little bit better. A, to sell tickets in Laval, and B, just you got that losing environment on your farm team. It's not good. So these are two players that haven't been able to play at the NHL level much or been successful, but they've been very good players at the AHL level, and I think that's what this trade was done. And at the end, so Thomas Plekanec could come back, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does in the summer.
And it also respected his wishes, too, that he wanted to be close to his family. He's got two young kids. The wife and the two kids are going to be staying here. He said Toronto's only an hour away. They by flight, they can fly there. And did you know that Toronto Maple Leafs sent a private jet to pick him up on Sunday?
Yeah, they did. Well, I got a private jet from you guys to come to the show.
That is true, yeah.
with a carton full of turtlenecks, a bunch of turtlenecks
I was
for
going
him
to
to
say, did
wear.
anybody feel bad that he had to shave his goatee? Like,
That
he
I feel
looks-
bad.
he looks
I
so
don't
vulnerable
recognize
or
him.
something.
I don't even recognize him. Although I can't really comment
like
on
he
hair
might get-
issues, so I'm not the right
He
person
might
for
get
that.
carded when he goes to
Yeah,
buy
exactly.
beer.
He looks like a baby.
That's his trademark. His goatee is his trademark.
And the turtleneck.
I hope he at least like shaved and donated it to charity or something. Like.
I'm sure his goatee is in a pillow somewhere.
Lou Lamoriello might have shaved it off himself. Come here, young man.
How would you rate any of the trade deadline acquisitions that the Habs made? Who at the trade deadline?
Well, Reilly is an interesting one. He played with Charlie Lindgren as a kid growing up. He said they played together from the time they were like 10 years old. And he played the University of Minnesota Gophers, and Charlie Lindgren talked about playing against them and how he was so good on the power play, so he's good with the puck. He says Claude Julien compared him to Victor Mete, and that's the style of defensemen going forward, is guys who can skate. So I'm interested to see what he can do. I think he's the one guy that will probably play for the Canadiens. For how long, we'll see, but I think that was an interesting pickup.
But if you think he's an improvement on Joe Morrow, so Mark Bergevin didn't really do too much, but these minor moves, it was an upgrade there. But he didn't do too much. But I don't think too many people were that surprised because I almost feel like now draft day has become more the time when you can get more value for certain players.
That's the thing. Like, Riley's going to get in the lineup because, again, they're inviting everybody from Laval to come play. But
did you get your invite?
Not yet, but I'm waiting for it. My cell phone's right here. But
when did they go to I think they still have the Goon team in Laval. Maybe they call up a couple of those guys.
yeah, I like it. I think that draft day is going to be the big thing. Like, trade deadline day is kind of overrated. Like nothing, unless you're trying to go for I don't know. I just feel like I didn't expect anything big to happen. Maybe Max to leave, but he didn't. But like when they can pick those 5 picks in the first 2 rounds or 10 overall, that's when they can make a difference for the next decade. You can either set your team up or screw it up for 10 years.
Yeah, the MVP on draft day is James Duthie now at TSN. He has to sit in that desk for like 12 hours talking about nothing. I don't know how he does it.
Are there some exciting picks that you think of in the second round that the Habs can get?
The second rounds there's so many good hockey players out there today. I mean, there's so many good hockey players. Victor Mete was a fourth round pick. Brendan Gallagher was a late pick. PK Subban was a second round pick. There's so many good hockey players out there that, you always hear, there's no depth in the draft, but they always find guys later on. They got 4 picks in the second round. But again, it's not who the Canadiens draft, it's how they develop guys. They can't develop anybody. So it doesn't matter who, we were talking to Alex Galchenyuk. He was the #1 center of the future. And then at the golf tournament this year, the GM says he cannot play center. So whose fault is that? You guys drafted him either your scouts didn't notice he couldn't play center, or your development team couldn't develop him into a center. So no matter how many picks they have, if they can't develop them, it doesn't matter.
It's like if you think of Jared Tenorti, I remember they traded so they could move up a few spots to get him. Now he's nowhere to be found. And then with Nathan Beaulieu, another first-round pick that was supposed to, be the puck-moving defenseman that they needed after Markov kind of went on.
Louis LeBlanc.
Yes,
the
Louis
list goes on and on.
yeah.
I mean, Charles Hudon is an example of somebody
another
but an example of somebody that they have developed well. I mean, he's now one of the most consistent players on the team.
That's true. And we're going to see about Nikita Sherbak coming up. So maybe it's changing a little bit, but there's that long gap where they didn't develop him is why they're paying the big price they are right now.
Okay. Well, that is our show for the week. Thanks for watching. What adjective or adjectives would you use to describe the fans who booed Max Pacioretty at the Bell Center? Can you beat Wimpy Pukes? I'm gonna be checking, and I'm gonna pick a winner. That's the show. I'm Adam Susser, and we'll see you back here next Thursday.